Johan was so shocked by Byung's proposal and how he acted that he had no choice but to tell him to stop it, pushing the younger man off him and running away. Before he left, Johan told him that they should just forget all of this and suggested that Byung find a new tutor. With that, Johan apologized and left Byung, thinking that was the end of it. Johan was able to come up with an excuse that was believable enough for Ji-yoon to finally let him go. Things were looking well, and Johan believed this would continue until the fall semester began. Johan really believed that he would be able to put the things that happened during the summer behind him until there he was again, Byung standing right in front of him and calling out to him. Johan instantly froze while his friend was puzzled, pointing out that the younger man was calling him. In a quiet voice, Johan says they should ignore him, but his friend didn't think it was a good idea, seeing how Byung glared at them. It wasn't until his friend saw Johan's trembling hand that he decided to do as his friend wanted. Without another word, Johan's friend pushes him straight past Byung while apologizing to the younger man, saying he and Johan already have something to do today. What he didn't expect was Byung's dagger-like stare at him, yet he decided to just ignore it while wondering if he just put himself in a difficult position between Johan and Byung. Little did Johan know that that day marked the beginning of Byung's harassment and unprovoked violence toward the people around him. Eventually, Johan has had enough, so he decides to confront Byung once and for all for what he has been doing. Out of frustration, Johan shouts at Byung, asking him what he ever did to the guy to make him act like this, even saying that Byung should have punched him instead of hurting his friends because they're not even involved. But Byung made it sound so simple when he answered Johan, explaining that he needed to hurt Johan's friends so that he could understand not to ignore him. Johan finds Byung's reasoning ridiculous, but the younger man expects as much and even has the audacity to play the victim. He went on about how he feels like crap whenever Johan ignores him, and on the off chance that he gets noticed by the older man, all Johan does is treat him like dirt. And yes, he used the ultimate sad boy manipulative line that he's always the bad guy. Johan countered that Byung was only reaping what he sowed, and the younger man just retorted that he was just acting like the bad guy Johan was portraying him to be. Talking with Byung like this just makes no sense, and all Johan could say is how he's out of his mind, something Byung says he hears a lot. As if that wasn't bad enough, Byung blames Johan's voice, saying this was all his fault that he got turned on, and stressing that his voice is the problem. The little nuthead even dared to say that he didn't want to do all this and that Johan made him do it. Seeing how their conversation was going nowhere, Johan sighed and told Byung that they should just stop. After all, he had no idea what the younger man wanted. If Byung wanted to exact revenge for Johan rejecting him, then he was done his job, because Johan was all alone now. Turning his back on Byung, Johan tells the other that he finally understands why others call the latter pitiable, a term that made Byung twitch. Byung asked him what he just said, but Johan continued and urged him to just keep hurting others and leave his life because the latter couldn't take it anymore. With his back still turned, Johan told him dejectedly not to see each other anymore and promised not to tell Ji-yoon about all of this. He was about to say something else, but what he saw next was all black as Byung grabbed the potted plant and smashed it right into Johan's head in a blind rage. When Byung came to his senses, he broke down and insisted that this was all Johan's fault for treating him like he was pitiable, while the older man could only listen as his consciousness started slipping away. Before he blacked out, Johan wondered if what Byung said was true. Johan's choices, him running away, accepting Ji-yoon's job offer, ignoring Byung, are all wrong because of how it all turned out like this. The next thing Johan knew, he woke up in the hospital with his head all bandaged up while Ji-yoon slumped by his bedside, all while thinking everything was his fault. This was the last thing Johan remembered as he woke up to the present with a snoring Soohwa by his side. He squeezed the younger man a little tighter, causing Soohwa to stir in his sleep, still groggy, and call out to him. When Johan didn't answer, Soohwa stared at the crown of his head, wondering if he had had a nightmare. After a moment's thought, Soohwa decided to face and cuddle Johan, patting him to calm him down while the older man blushed and held him tighter. This time we open up with Soohwa staring intently at his boss, asking him if he's sick because of how red his face is. Johan shakes his head, but our boy is insistent that it's a cold, which is why he calls Ji-yoon, saying that Johan might be sick. Leave it to the overprotective Ji-yoon to overreact as he comes onto Johan, shouting and telling the older man that he should have said so when he's feeling unwell, but he didn't get to finish his sentence. Ji-yoon could only frown as Johan told him in sign language that he was not sick, stressing his statement by shaking his head. Seeing his friend look okay calmed Ji-yoon, much to Soohwa's surprise. But Soohwa was determined to show him what was wrong, and this time he grabbed Johan's shirt and told the other man to look at him. While Soohwa stared, Johan started blushing, which made the younger man call out to his sunbae that their boss's face was all red. The best Ji-yoon could do at that moment was put on a grimace for the two men in front of him. Soohwa's a bit slow on the pickup, no. But what's surprising is that Ji-yoon didn't say anything condescending toward them. What he said instead was a suggestion to close the shop early if Johan feels sick, even though he doesn't in his eyes, and that he needs to head out as well. This caught Soohwa by surprise because his sunbae usually comes and goes as he pleases without saying anything, which made Ji-yoon ask if Soohwa had a problem with it. Of course, our boy is quick to fold to Ji-yoon, while his sunbae couldn't even bear to look at them. With a dreadful aura around him, Ji-yoon tells him that he just got bombarded with some harsh truths right now, which is why he's having a hard time processing it all. Moreover, Ji-yoon says that there's also something he needs to check out, which is why he had to go. Soohwa wonders in his mind if all of that is because of him, but he dares not to voice it out loud. Without looking back, Ji-yoon heads for the door and tells them they can do whatever they want to close early or keep the cafe open, but reminds the two to stay inside unless they can't help it. As the door slams shut, Soohwa turns to his boss and relays what Ji-yoon said about how it's up to them to keep the cafe open or not. What's more, Soohwa asks Yohan to level with him for a bit, which the latter did, and to his surprise, Soohwa puts his palm over the older man's forehead to check his temperature. While still looking at Yohan, our boy is a bit puzzled since Yohan doesn't seem to have a fever at all. Still, he thinks it would be better if he runs out for a bit to get some cold medicine, not noticing how Yohan is already looking at him with tender eyes. Yohan grabs Soohwa's wrist and towers over him, his face already so close to the younger man. This time it's Soohwa's turn to flush as Yohan gently caresses his cheek. The older man speaks and asks if he should just do as Ji-yoon suggested, closing the cafe early, which Soohwa didn't expect to hear. Even Soohwa was a bit reluctant, pointing out to his boss that they've been closing up shop pretty early lately and wondering about their sales. Yohan assures him that there's no need to worry about that as he embraces Soohwa, asking the younger one if he doesn't want to do it. By now our boy's already a beet red mess and has caved in, since this is the only time Yohan acts so boldly toward him. Instead of taking things to a more private location, Yohan decided that they should do the deed there while both of them were fully clothed. He kisses Soohwa through his clothes, and our boy could only ask why his boss was in a rush today. Apart from that, they were still at the front door for goodness' sake, and Yohan couldn't help but want him more. Soohwa grows frustrated because he's doing it again. Yohan's pretending not to hear him as the older one continues playing around with Soohwa's body. Yohan's touches only left Soohwa feeling weird, frustrated, and thinking that this wasn't enough, so he caressed Yohan's cheek and informed the other that he wasn't doing it like that. So Yohan asks him how he wants it, and Soohwa simply says that he wants to feel Yohan skin to skin. So yes, Soohwa and Yohan dived right into it. Our boy Soohwa also discovered something that day. His boss Yohan actually has a pretty high libido, so much so that Soohwa has trouble keeping up with him. Our boy is often left as a weeping mess, and this time is no different than the last. Currently, the two are going at it in the bathroom, and yes, they were supposed to shower first. Flashback to a few moments ago. Yohan was ready to take Soohwa right then and there near the front door, but the younger man stopped him, suggesting they should shower first. Yohan answers quietly that they already took one that morning, but Soohwa insists on taking one again, thinking they should use that time to calm down for a bit. Yohan stared at him for a good while before conceding, which had Soohwa taken aback because this man doesn't usually cave in. Our boy was about to head in first, thinking it would be a good time out for Yohan, but he didn't get to finish what he was saying to the older man because his boss had already lifted him off the floor. In a panic, Soohwa grabs Yohan's hair for fear of falling, but all Yohan can think of is that he can't see where he's going. Finally, Yohan speaks and tells Soohwa that they should shower together, leaving our boy flushed and panicking while also wondering how Yohan could walk so well without seeing when Soohwa suddenly bangs his head on the doorway. That has got to hurt poor Soohwa. So back to the steaming action, Yohan continues to tease him, asking if Soohwa's okay, until our boy suddenly wrote something on the mirror that made the older man blush. Clue: it starts with a P and rhymes with herb. There was a moment's silence before Yohan broke out laughing, leaning onto Soohwa's back, but he quickly got over it and suggested they try a different position this time around. With that being said, he grabs Soohwa's chin, forcing him to face the mirror as Yohan tells him that he'll read his lips through the mirror. Our boy was about to say something, but it didn't push through when Yohan started going at it. While in the middle of the deed, Soohwa remembers how scary and painful that position was, but now all he could think about was how good it felt reaching his hand out to touch Yohan's face as he said so. The older man seems pleased and takes his hand in turn, saying how it feels the same for him. It's a brand new day at Café Goyo, but the inside is feeling a bit too tense as the customers, as well as Soohwa, have their eyes glued to the counter where Yohan and Ji-yoon are busy conversing in a mix of sign language and talking. While Yohan relays his messages using gestures, Ji-yoon answers him with a raised voice and a frown, saying that he's not cool with what the other man is saying. Soohwa calls them out and is about to intervene, but Ji-yoon meets him with a glare, making him back up and heave a sigh before informing the two that the customers are staring at them. Not like the two care about it, they continue their conversation, and this time Ji-yoon uses sign language to tell Yohan that a no is a no regardless of what his boss says. But Yohan is unrelenting, telling his friend that he's pretty confident this time. Their sign language exchange continued for a good while, which is kind of like a Kakashi versus Zabuza hand-seal showdown if you ask me. Meanwhile, our boy could only stare, unable to keep up with their conversation as he muttered a question to himself, wondering if they'd be okay. Imagine Soohwa's surprise when the customer in front of him assured him that the two would be fine, smiling as she said so. Realizing that he was still in the middle of work, our boy went into customer service mode and asked her if she'd use her card to pay. Instead of answering that, the customer told Soohwa that Yohan and Ji-yoon bickering during this time of the year is pretty common and that she along with other regulars knew all about it. So since she already opened it up, Soohwa asked what the two were arguing about and she said it was the new menu items. She continued explaining how Yohan wants to add more coffee to his menu, but we all know that crap is more lethal than cyanide. Before she went to her seat, she assured Soohwa that the two would sort it out in the end, thanking her for taking the time to explain why the two were fighting in the first place. He comments in his mind that she knows more about his sunbae and boss than him, which means that she must be a regular at the cafe. Turning his attention to the two older men, Soohwa walks over to them and asks Ji-yoon why he's so against Yohan's decision to add more drinks to the menu. From what he's seeing, they could just introduce the new drinks into the menu, and if it sells, then good. But if it flops, then they could just remove it altogether, so why is Ji-yoon making such a big deal out of it? His sunbae knows that Soohwa's suggestion is cool and all, but the one thing he can't take is Yohan making him his guinea pig to taste test the coffee he makes. Now Soohwa understands why Ji-yoon was hellbent on saying no, so back to his sunbae, Ji-yoon turns to Yohan and says he won't cave this time. Yohan is about to say something, but Ji-yoon tells him that they are done talking. There was a pregnant pause until Yohan sighed and glanced at Ji-yoon with a pout, making the latter's conscience grow heavier. Suddenly, Ji-yoon is all over Yohan, asking his boss if he offended him and tries to get on his good graces again. He's trying to butter up to Yohan, saying he didn't mean to sound rude about it and hoping the other man is not hurt by his blatant rejection. In the end, Ji-yoon apologizes and agrees to Yohan's plans while Soohwa looks at them intently from where he stands. Suddenly, our boy narrows his eyes and tells the two that he'll go and clean up outside. Soohwa proceeded to go to the storefront and sweep the fallen leaves while thinking about Ji-yoon and Yohan. For his sunbae, he realized that Ji-yoon will always have a soft spot for Yohan despite being hard-headed, and from the looks of it, Yohan's well aware of it too. Based on what he saw earlier, he thinks Yohan's just pretending to feel bad, pouting at Ji-yoon like that. While thinking of them, Soohwa wrapped up his cleaning duties and sat on the bench, remembering Yohan's pout. It made him realize that he was not the only one Yohan had shown that face to. As soon as he thought about it, Soohwa caught himself wondering why he even thought of such a thing. He buries his face in his hands, ashamed at what he just thought, and why is he even thinking about that in the first place? Sitting with his thoughts like this, Soohwa realizes that it's as if he's jealous and has difficulty admitting it. And when he did, he instantly bashed his head against the metal fence, thinking that this couldn't be, while still blushing. Next thing we know, Soohwa is getting treated for his injury with a bandage on his forehead. Ji-yoon only looks at him and asks how he keeps getting injured at the same spot every time. Is it his pastime? Soohwa averts his gaze, thinking that he can't exactly tell Ji-yoon the truth, so he settles for a lie instead. He tells his sunbae that he twisted his foot and fell head first, but the older man knew better. Leaning closer to Soohwa, he could tell there was something this kid was not telling him, while Soohwa put his hand up to keep his distance. Ji-yoon cannot be deterred. He moves closer, his lips just a few inches away from Soohwa as he forces the younger man to spill it, but Soohwa denies it, refusing to budge. Ji-yoon drew even closer to Soohwa, almost touching his ears, and was about to ask why his hubei couldn't look him in the eye when a hand suddenly came in between them. Soohwa and Ji-yoon both looked in the direction from where it came, finding out that it belonged to Yohan, who had his head bowed down. Just as quickly, their boss regained his composure while still flushing and apologized profusely. Ji-yoon only stared at his friend for a hot minute before sighing, making Soohwa turn to him. When he raised his head, Ji-yoon used sign language to tell Yohan that the interrupter aka Ji-yoon himself would take his leave, while Yohan only stared and was confused as to why Ji-yoon addressed himself as such. Leave it to Ji-yoon to be perceptive as always. Soohwa asks where he is going and his sunbae says he'll take over the counter for now, slamming the door shut on his way out. As soon as he did, Soohwa turned to look at Yohan, instantly locking eyes with him, which made the two of them blush. Yohan was the first to initiate contact, tapping Soohwa's hand as he asked if his forehead was all right. Soohwa says it is, plus it's not like it's the first time he injured his forehead like this, which made him ponder a bit on what Ji-yoon said earlier, him making a habit out of getting forehead injuries. Since they're already here, our boy took courage and asked Yohan one of the questions that's been bugging his mind ever since. How does Yohan know Ji-yoon? Now this was an unexpected question, making Yohan ask in return why he wanted to know that, so Soohwa hurriedly answered that it was purely out of curiosity and nothing more. Yohan explains that he and Ji-yoon knew each other from college and grew closer from there. He continued that Ji-yoon was also the one who helped him out a lot after he lost his hearing and was a big help when Yohan was starting to set up the cafe. Yohan said all of this using sign language, which left poor Soohwa confused, only getting snippets like college and helping from all those gestures. Thankfully, his brain pieced it all together and understood that Ji-yoon was Yohan's college friend. Now that he knows about the two's origins, it finally makes sense for Soohwa that they were close, though it still makes him jealous. Sort of. As soon as he said it, Soohwa bashed his head against the table, embarrassed as hell for revealing his feelings. Now he can't even raise his head, asking himself why he just had to come out and say something like that. Our boy literally let his mouth run free. and now fully regrets it when Yohan leans close and asks him if he was jealous about his closeness with Jiyoon. Soohwa instantly stood up, startled by Yohan's sudden question, though he didn't exactly answer no to his boss as well. Our boy started backing away from Yohan while the latter moved closer, this time asking Soohwa if he wanted to be closer to Jiyoon. Or maybe Soohwa's jealous of how close his sunbae was to Yohan, whispering the last question into Soohwa's ears as he said so. Soohwa started fumbling his words when Yohan put his hand on his chin, making him face the older man as he admitted with a flush that he was jealous. Putting his hands on top of Yohan, Soohwa finally admits to Yohan and himself his wish for Yohan to treat him more special compared to Jiyoon. As he said that, Yohan's fingers brushed over Soohwa's lip and he was about to say something else when he decided to ask our boy if he could kiss Soohwa. Finally, we've got some development between the two. Finally, our Dumb and Dumber duo finally kissed after a lot of tension and short mutual pining on their part. Of course, leave it to Yohan to turn the kiss into a heated one, going in for another round and Frenching our poor boy. Speaking of Soohwa, it made him wonder why he was feeling it so much when all they've been doing this time is much more intense, so this should be easy, right? That's what he thought as he asked Yohan if he was satisfied, but the older man wanted to do a little more and Soohwa obliged him, putting his arms around Yohan as they did so. After all that steamy makeout session, the two headed out to join Jiyoon at the counter. As his sunbae turned to face them, he couldn't help but comment on how Soohwa should have at least fixed his clothes first before he started making excuses. He even stressed how he left the room earlier to give them space, but Soohwa was already defensive. Our boy tries to reason that nothing really happened between Yohan and him fixing his button as he says so, but Jiyoon believes otherwise. Glancing at Yohan, the older man gave our boy a puzzled look while Soohwa quickly averted his gaze, blaming his boss for all of this. Flashback to a short while ago. Soohwa stopped Yohan from kissing him, saying they should head back because Jiyoon may become suspicious of them, and yes, let's just say the customers are secondary to what Jiyoon thinks, at least for Soohwa. Bumping his head against Soohwa, Yohan reaches out and locks the door while saying he wants to keep going. But Soohwa doesn't want to do it anymore, going back and forth with this until the older man kisses him again and even starts to touch his body. Soohwa shoves him back, suddenly his head hanging low, and he feels ashamed of what he is about to say and do right there. Gripping Yohan's shirt, he instructs the older man to lean against the wall so that he can blow him. And who was Yohan to say no? He allowed Soohwa to do what he wanted, and it didn't take long for him to start feeling his release. He apologizes as he puts Soohwa's head in position before reaching his peak, while our boy takes it all, flinching and still on his knees. When his senses finally came to him, Yohan panicked and asked him to let it all out. Unfortunately for Yohan, he is a weak man, and seeing Soohwa do that only made him blush and lean his head on the younger man's shoulder. He asks our boy if he wants to continue tonight, and all Soohwa can do is nod and agree. If there's one thing you can expect about Yohan and Soohwa, it's that they're sure to do the deed when they say so. When night came, the two came fumbling upstairs, eager to have their hands all over each other's bodies. Their feelings are even more heightened by the fact that they both freely kiss each other now, though Yohan still takes the lead in the bedroom. As the older man stripped, Soohwa couldn't help but comment on how nice Yohan's body was and was about to ask how he kept in shape when he got smothered by a kiss. Yohan's mind was busy thinking about what was happening now and noticing how Soohwa had been feeling it, even though the older man hadn't done much at all. That's when our boy revealed that he has been feeling it ever since he serviced Yohan earlier, earning another deep kiss from his boss. With a few love taps, Soohwa finally reached the top and was still feeling high when Yohan smiled at him and told him how sweet he was. Compared to the other times he spoke, Soohwa's heart tugged at the sound of his voice, making him wonder if his boss' voice had always been this tender. He didn't have time to think about it much because Yohan was quick to get some action done while Soohwa could only take it. As usual, our boy is the first one to throw in the towel while Yohan jumps his bones a little more before entwining their hands and kissing the younger man's nape. When he calls for Soohwa, the younger man is on the verge of being antsy as he says he can't do it anymore, just as the former asks if he is okay. Our boy answered truthfully and even threatened that he'd go on strike starting tomorrow. He was about to say more until Yohan shushed him and said he'd stop now. What Yohan proposes instead is for them to keep kissing, which Soohwa allows. As their hands intertwined, Yohan said he loved doing this with Soohwa, a sentiment that the younger man echoed. A few days later, boxes were being moved and one voice asked if the one he was holding was the last. He was answered by another claiming that there were more boxes left upstairs and that Yohan would get them. These voices belonged to Jihae and Soohwa respectively, with our boy apologizing to Jihae for taking up his time. The ever-cheerful Hubei didn't mind since he was the one who offered to help in the first place. Among other things, Jihae can't help but comment on how Soohwa only has a few things too, but our boy was still wrapped up around the fact that the younger man doesn't even want to get paid for helping out. To that, Jihae rebuts that Soohwa already promised to buy him a real dinner next time, so our boy had no choice but to concede because this cinnamon roll knows too much about him. Free dinner aside, Soohwa also remarks that he didn't know his hubei owned a delivery truck, and to that Jihae simply explained that his family owns an orchard. Plus, he also has some relatives who own farms, which is why he helps out with deliveries sometimes. Since they're at it, he also told Soohwa that most of the produce he delivers at Yohan's cafe is from his family's farm, and he had Jiyoon to thank for putting in a good word for them. How of course it's Jiyoon. He'll move mountains for you, Jihae. And speaking of the devil heir Jiyoon, Jihae finally noticed that his helpful Sunbae wasn't here today, which he found a bit weird since he knows Jiyoon likes to help out a lot in things like these. Soohwa only smiles at him, thinking that it's all a facade Jiyoon puts up for Jihae only. Still, Soohwa decides to tell Jihae that Jiyoon actually wanted to come and help out, which is partly true but mostly not. So flashback to Soohwa's previous conversation with the difficult Jiyoon. Our boy actually asked his Sunbae if he wanted to help out since he already found a new tenant for his previous unit. Upon hearing that, Jiyoon asks if he plans on putting up partitions because Yohan's place is in an open space, but Soohwa says he doesn't need to. Technically, Soohwa thinks he won't really be living there. He's just staying at Yohan's for a bit, at least until he finds a new place. Besides, he knows he won't take up a lot of space with how little his stuff is. Jiyoon only hums as a comment, so Soohwa asks him if he wants to come help out during their day off next week. Jiyoon turns it down, saying he already has plans and Yohan's already going to be there, so he finds no reason why he should go. And in true Jiyoon tsundere fashion, he tells Soohwa that even if he didn't have plans, he still doesn't want to go, much to our boy's annoyance. To get back to Jiyoon, Soohwa shows him that he and Jihae will be coming too. That rattled Jiyoon alright, making him spring from his seat as he asked aloud why Jihae was coming and when did the two become close. Was Soohwa deliberately contacting his hubei without Jiyoon's knowledge? All these questions, and Soohwa tells him one at a time. Jiyoon was determined to know all about it, as he asked this time if he didn't say anything weird to Jihae. That hit a nerve because Soohwa counters him by saying to Jiyoon that he's not like his Sunbae, explaining that he and Jihae grew closer after bumping into each other and exchanging numbers right after. He even said that they don't even contact each other daily, which finally calmed Jiyoon down. But he found another reason to get pissed, this time asking Soohwa why he didn't tell him earlier, so our boy fired back, throwing Jiyoon a question as he asked why he should tell him everything. The kid's got a point though, Jiyoon. In the end, his Sunbae could only glare at him while Yohan served him samples of the items on the new menu. Back to the present, our boy couldn't help but tremble in fear just by the mere recollection of that memory. But thankfully, Jihae changed the topic when he noticed how Soohwa had a lot of English books among his belongings. This prompted him to ask if the older man was taking a course on something that Soohwa explained was for his major. At the mention of that, Jihae had to ask blatantly if Soohwa was an English major, and our boy already read what was on his mind, voicing out what Jihae thought, that the course didn't suit him. The ever-cheerful Jihae answered truthfully and apologized for thinking so, but Soohwa didn't mind because he gets that a lot. Furthermore, Jihae also thought that Soohwa had already graduated, but the latter said he was taking a break from school because he wanted to rest for a bit. In reality, he says he didn't get much rest due to a lack of funds that makes the two of us Soohwa. Going back to his books, Jihae asks him if it is cool to take it up to him when he reads something he doesn't understand, which Soohwa accepts with the promise that he can't guarantee anything. Suddenly, Jihae's phone starts vibrating, and when he checks to see who it is, not surprisingly enough, at least for us, it's their Jiyoon Sunbae. At the mention of the name, Soohwa flinches and makes up an excuse that he'll head to Yohan while the younger one takes the call. Jihae agrees and tells him that he'll just wait outside. So our boy heads back to his unit to see Yohan sitting at the table, asking him what he was still doing up there. Soohwa, the man's deaf, so he can't exactly hear you, you know. Yohan was busy flipping through Soohwa's old yearbook, which the latter finally notices when he reaches him and pats his shoulder. Naturally, Yohan was startled by the sudden touch, making Soohwa apologize. He follows it up by saying how he and Jihae have been waiting downstairs for a while now and if everything is okay. The older man nodded as an answer while still trying to calm his palpitating heart. With Yohan busy trying to calm himself, Soohwa glances at his yearbook again and stares right at his photo. In all honesty, he doesn't care if Yohan flips through it, but he still can't help but feel a little shy, especially with his hair like that. Meanwhile, his boss scoots closer and tells him he looks cute, making Soohwa blush even more, and he flips the yearbook shut. He says they need to head downstairs now since Jihae is waiting and will carry his yearbook instead, clutching it into his chest. Suddenly, Yohan makes him face him and quickly kisses Soohwa's lips. After doing so, our boy couldn't help but comment on how Yohan's been doing that a lot lately regardless of the place, as the older man justifies that it feels good. He asks Soohwa if it's okay to have one more, to which Soohwa says okay when Jihae's voice suddenly rings loud. The younger man asks them if there's anything else he needs to take down as he opens the door to the sight of Yohan almost kissing Soohwa. The sudden intrusion almost made Soohwa jump out of his skin, while Jihae says he's been waiting downstairs, unable to finish his sentence because of what he saw. The next thing we know, Soohwa's out buying beer and paying for it at the counter, asking the cashier to bag that liquid courage. He feels a little somber before exiting the convenience store and walking back home when suddenly he screams in his mind and blushes furiously at that too. Oh, Soohwa, forever so relatable, my spirit animal. To get an understanding of why Soohwa did that, let's take it back to a few minutes ago when he finally organized the last of his things at Yohan's place. With a sigh, he takes a look at the place, wondering if he could do more and thinking about how he needs to find a new place soon when a newly showered Yohan appears behind him. As if on instinct, the older man wraps his arms around Soohwa, nuzzling his nape when our boy looks up and asks if he's done with washing up. Yohan answered him with a kiss on the cheek and was already reaching for Soohwa's special parts when our boy asked him to wait a minute. Of course, Yohan didn't hear that, obviously, and with Soohwa facing the other way, he could only tremble and flinch at the touch until he decided to push Yohan back. It caught both of them off guard, and Soohwa makes up an excuse saying he hasn't showered yet and that he feels tired. Curiously enough, even Soohwa doesn't seem to buy his own excuses, but he decides to tell Yohan the truth. He's not in the mood for it. Now that came as a bigger shock to the older man, who could only nod while our boy started to panic, wondering if that was a bit too much. Soohwa tries to appease him, saying that it's not like he doesn't like Yohan, but more like beer. Yes, our boy settled for the excuse of wanting a beer, which is why he quickly donned his coat and ran out of the house. Now that he's alone, Yohan puts his hand over his heart and wonders why he was so shocked by what Soohwa said when he realized that it had gotten so late. So that's the story of how Soohwa found himself buying beer late at night. Back to the present, our boy decides to sit and chill at the park, heaving a big sigh as he blames all of this on what Jihye said. Taking it back again, earlier that day, Jihye apologizes profusely for barging in on such a crucial time between Soohwa and Yohan. But our boy tells him that it's fine. What isn't fine right now is how he was feeling toward Yohan, who ran out on him instead. What Soohwa didn't expect was for Jihye to tell him that he didn't know he and Yohan were a thing. Soohwa clears it up and tells the younger man that he's not together with his boss, stressing how he doesn't have a romantic relationship with the older man. Strangely enough, Soohwa has a hard time denying this fact, fumbling with his words that they're not exactly together, but at the same time they are, from which Jihye easily concludes that they're dating. He was about to rebut this, but the ever-cheerful Jihye took it upon himself to keep this a secret and assured his sunbae that he didn't find them weird at all. In the end, Soohwa could only muster a thank you, because how exactly was he supposed to counter that? So here he is, head over his hands, sitting by the park bench thinking about what Jihye said. When Jiyoon was the one who asked him about his relationship status with Yohan, Soohwa was quick to answer that there was nothing between them, but it was different back then. Now that he's aware of his feelings toward Yohan, Soohwa can't just admit that sleeping around with him is pretty casual, because it's not what he wants. He doesn't like it one bit that he's not in a relationship with Yohan and that he has no right to know about the older man's past. Dang, being in a situationship sure is hard. No. His greed for wanting to become more special to Yohan grows stronger, wishing fervently that Yohan would treat him as special to have what's between them become special. While thinking about all this, Soohwa finally realized what this feeling was. He likes Yohan. Like most of us who find it hard to accept the truth, Soohwa turned to alcohol. He started drinking the beer he bought from the convenience store and heaved a sigh followed by a dazed look. And he does it again one more time before he asks himself what to do next, because he can't go back to the apartment right now. Soohwa throws the empty cans in the trash, thinking that he can't stay out here, while also wondering how he'll look at Yohan from now on. As if to make matters worse, they're living in the same place too, which is really not helping how things are right now. Thinking about all of this just made him wish back to the time when he wasn't aware of his feelings, but maybe there's a chance that he's just confused, right? He decided to give it a go from the top, starting with Yohan being a guy. However, he's also tall, a good cook, and a plant lover, and there's his almighty sword. Okay, nope, that's a bonus. Back to the wholesome things. Yes, Soohwa finds him cute, but why the heck did he have to realize it just now? Luckily for Soohwa, these thoughts flew out of his mind when he felt a light tap on his shoulder. He turns to see an unfamiliar man asking if he is okay with the former, saying he saw Soohwa not far back and recognized him as one of the guys working at the coffee shop. It's the delivery guy from before. But it looks like he's in Clark Kent mode, which is why Soohwa doesn't recognize him, asking him flat out just who he is. The latter explained that he was not a creep and said that they had met before, leaving Soohwa even more confused by what he said. The older man said that he stops by the coffee shop to deliver plants sometimes, so now Soohwa finally recognizes him. And still there's still no name revealed, HMP. So we'll still call him the delivery guy, telling our boy that he decided to approach Soohwa when he recognized who he was. He decided to do so, seeing how Soohwa was swaying back and forth, assuming that he must be drunk, but our boy denied this. The man believes him, seeing for himself how sober Soohwa is, while our boy thanks him for his concern. What Soohwa didn't expect was for this man to accompany him on his walk home, the latter insisting because it was just along the way for him. Since they'd be walking together, the delivery guy went ahead and asked why Soohwa was drinking alone. Was there something on his mind? I don't know if Soohwa is just careless or if the alcohol got to him, but he easily answered the older man's question, saying that it was something like that. The delivery guy took it as a sign that Soohwa was cool with him, so he took it a step further and put his arm around the other guy, urging him to spill and share. Even the delivery dude finds that Soohwa gets friendly too fast, while our boy laughs. While poking fun at Soohwa's tight lip and cheek, the delivery guy laughed it off and assumed that he must be having love problems. It took a moment for Soohwa to say that it wasn't like that, but the cogs were already turning on the delivery guy's head, thinking he must have hit the nail on the head with that one. Though in all honesty it was just his lucky guess. Soohwa continues and starts by saying how there's a certain person in his life right now who he sees in a different light, making everything so unfamiliar to him right now. With that being said, he says shyly to the delivery guy that now he doesn't know how to act in front of that person before facepalming himself in embarrassment. Surprisingly, the older man finds Soohwa's reaction cute and makes him think that if he had a younger friend like Soohwa, then he'd make fun of him a lot. Back to their conversation, the delivery guy had an aha moment and understood why Soohwa was drinking then, while our poor MC asked him not to tease him of his woes because he didn't know what to do from there. Before any of them could talk, Soohwa saw Yohan appear from the corner block, so he turned to the delivery guy saying Yohan came out to fetch him. With that being said, he tells the delivery guy that he'll just go with Yohan now, while the latter bids him goodbye cheerfully. But just when Soohwa was about to walk toward Yohan, the delivery guy called his name, saying he usually has nightly walks around 11 p.m. He added that he's ready to lend an ear to Soohwa in case he needs to vent, which our MC appreciate. With that, the delivery quickly turned around just as Yohan finally reached his mind. However, it got Soohwa wondering when he told his name to that dude. Well, he couldn't care any less now that Yohan's here, as the older man asked how Soohwa ended up with that dude. Our boy explained how they ran into each other a while ago and told Yohan that there was no need for him to head out as well. Yohan responded and told him that he got worried because Soohwa left his phone, a realization that left Soohwa surprised as well. But he even became more surprised when Yohan decided to steal a kiss from him, telling his boss that they were out in public right now and that he should ask for permission next time. It's not good for his heart, you know. Unknown to them, a phone camera snaps a picture of them together, belonging to none other than the delivery guy himself. He quickly hides behind the corner, finally understanding who Soohwa was talking about earlier. He feels a bit anxious, wondering what to do, because if he shows this to his master Byung, then there's a high chance that he'll raise hell. And knowing how much of a sicko he is, he'd probably go full Michael Myers on Soohwa. The next thing we know, Yohan and Soohwa are at it again, with the latter busy watering Soohwa's pipe. Just when he was about to kiss him, our boy suddenly clamped his palm over Yohan's and then apologized just as quickly for doing so. Yohan didn't say anything and just narrowed his eyes, focusing on exploring Soohwa's cavern, but even our boy prohibited him from doing that. Soohwa tells him that he's not in the mood, stilling Yohan's arm in place with his grip as he tells him that they should open up soon. All these acts have their repercussions, and the unlucky ones who received Yohan's wrath were the innocent vegetables and other ingredients from the meal he was cooking. Yohan clearly had enough and didn't give a crap, burning the dish while Ji-yoon's eyes widened in panic. It was the latter who decided to intervene and turned the stove off, saying how Yohan scared him because he almost torched the whole cafe, while the former just sighed on the side. Ji-yoon turns to him and asks if there is something wrong because Yohan's been making a lot of mistakes he doesn't usually make. After a moment's pause, Yohan told him in sign language that it was nothing, but even he could see through such a blatant lie. Ji-yoon was determined to know what was wrong, so he asked Soohwa again why he was being like that. He started asking his hunches, like if there was another creep who came to the cafe, or maybe he had a fight with someone. Yohan only stared at him for a little bit before hanging his head low again, making Ji-yoon a little more desperate. Suddenly, Soohwa slams his hand on the counter before facing Ji-yoon, mumbling about something blue. Blue what? Ji-yoon didn't hear it clearly, so he asks again, and with a glare, Yohan reveals that he's getting blue ball. Well, Ji-yoon can't exactly react violently to that, but he is pissed on the inside, yet flashes a smile to Soohwa on the outside. This isn't exactly the kind of problem you'd expect to hear in a workplace, especially from Yohan out of all people. So the two decided to take it into the staff room, where Ji-yoon couldn't help but comment with a tinge of annoyance how the first thing he'll hear from Yohan after so long would be about him being blue-balled. His boss was quick to apologize, but Ji-yoon had already moved forward, asking if he had fought with Soohwa. The older man says he doesn't know, but shared how Soohwa started to avoid him recently, eliciting a hum from Ji-yoon. Yohan continued that he'd get it if it was just a few times only, but now it's been a week since they've done their bedroom exercise, even elaborating how Soohwa's fine with being touched but not the actual in and out. While saying all this, Ji-yoon's face went from being surprised to mildly agitated to full-on pissed off. Yohan was about to continue, saying that the youngest of them didn't even want to kiss him, but Ji-yoon stopped him right then, while the former pointed out that it was Ji-yoon who asked first. In his defense, Ji-yoon told him that he doesn't know every little thing. So back to business, Ji-yoon points out the obvious first. Has he asked Soohwa if there was something wrong? Yohan answers no, prompting the other to ask why, and Yohan answers using sign language his thoughts. What if Soohwa doesn't like him anymore? Ji-yoon only looked at him and again questioned why it mattered if that was the case. After all, Yohan said before that he didn't like Soohwa, so if he doesn't like him, why is he affected by what their youngest thinks? Yohan couldn't give him a straight answer, so with a sigh he levels with his older friend and asks Yohan if he's really sure that he doesn't like Soohwa. Meanwhile, at the park later that night, someone was busy plucking petals off a daisy, wondering if he should send it or not until the last petal signaled that he should send it. It's the delivery guy, whose name we still don't know until now, racking his mind on what to do next since his master Byung instructed him to report to him all things that involved Soohwa. He knows he has to send the photo he snapped the other day, but for some reason, aka his conscience, he feels a bit off sending it. But then again, if he doesn't send that to his loony headmaster and gets caught with that photo later on, he's pretty sure Byung will lay it out on him pretty hard this time. However, if he does his duty and sends it, he feels sorry for Soohwa, especially since he seems like a nice kid. Speaking of Soohwa, our MC appeared right in front of him just when he was thinking about it. The delivery guy starts unwrapping a lollipop while Soohwa confirms if he just did that on purpose the other day. This made the older man pause momentarily while our boy referred to how he covered his mouth while speaking back then. Soohwa thinks that this dude did that so Yohan wouldn't be able to read his lips, while the other man smiles sheepishly and offers the candy to Soohwa. Without any hint of wariness, our boy just bit into it and told him that he shouldn't do that again. Our boy continues, saying that Yohan was obviously watching that time, and with the delivery guy covering his mouth, it makes Yohan feel like he's being excluded and ignored, which doesn't feel nice. The delivery guy apologized and said he wouldn't do it again, while Soohwa accepted his apology and thanked him for the candy. But if this were real life, I'd like to think Soohwa would be a little more careful accepting candies from random people. Dude, be careful. Changing the topic, the older man asked if Soohwa came all the way out there a week later just to tell him that before asking about Soohwa's love troubles. But our boy kept a tight lip, so the delivery guy tried to ease up to him by relating how it's easier for him to open up to people he doesn't know than those who know him. But that he gave one last urge to Soohwa and said he'd hear him out, seeing how cute our boy was, and that he reminded the older man of his younger days. With a grunt, Soohwa began as he narrated that he and the person he was talking about were practically dating now, prompting the older man to ask what made him think so. Soohwa shyly says that they've kissed, while the delivery guy cheers, suggesting that our boy should just confess to him so that they can make it official. But that's the thing, it got Soohwa thinking if that's still needed. What if he confesses but the other party doesn't feel the same? If that happens, then they won't be able to continue with whatever it is between them, which Soohwa doesn't want to end. For him, he thinks keeping things as they are, a situationship like what the kids call it nowadays, if I may add, is much better than ending it altogether. In addition to that, he doesn't want to pressure the other person, so he believes that it's better to leave things the way they are, even if it means they can't get any closer. The delivery guy pats Soohwa's head while doing his best to hold himself back. He continues to pat our boy, asking him if he wants to become his little brother, but Soohwa doesn't understand what's up with him suddenly. As he removed the older man's hand from his head, Soohwa remembered to ask him how this dude knew his name, because he knew he hadn't told him that. That caught the delivery guy off guard, and then he proceeded to tell him how careless he was meeting a random stranger late at night at a park and eating the candy from the said stranger, which made Soohwa start to feel anxious. The older man explained that he overheard Soohwa's name being called a few times when he made some deliveries at the cafe one time. Additionally, he said the name stuck to him because it was pretty unusual, an excuse Soohwa believed without a second thought. In his mind, the delivery guy panicked a bit because he almost got caught, so now he keeps a mental note to be mindful of what he says. Since he said all that he needed to say, Soohwa tells the older man that he needs to go back soon, while the latter asks if he wants someone to come walk with him back to the cafe. Soohwa turns him down but says he'll just see him again, thanking the older man for listening. And that's when he finally introduces himself. The delivery guy says that his name is Hyunho and lets him in on a little something. Hyunho doesn't go around kissing people he has no feelings for. But finally we got the delivery guy's name. From Hyunho's perspective, he thinks that Soohwa has a shot, so he might as well shoot it, urging him to seduce them, the term echoing in the younger man's mind. On the other hand, back at Yohan's place, our big man's got his head preoccupied with what Ji-yoon said to him earlier. And where else could he best ponder his thoughts other than the shower? Now that he has given it some thought, Yohan started this setup with Soohwa out of guilt, but soon forgot all about it. He doesn't want Soohwa to hate him, and he wants to treat our boy well. Honestly speaking, he wants Soohwa to stay by his side in the future. While drying his hair off, he also thought about how at first he just found Soohwa cute, but now he admits that he must have really liked the guy and has fallen for him. This mutual pining is killing me. This is why communication is key, guys. Back to Yohan's internal monologue. He doesn't know what to do now, and he feels like doing the nasty with Soohwa. After drying himself, he got dressed and told himself that he should control his urges until Soohwa gave him the okay, when the very sight that welcomed him as he opened the bathroom door was the object of his affection, sniffing his shirt. Soohwa was just as taken aback, actually even more so since he got caught in the act, so he tried to make an excuse, but all Yohan could think of was that he needed to control himself. While turning red, Soohwa tries to come up with an excuse, saying how he was about to see the shirt on the floor and was about to put it away but got distracted by how good it smelled. But Yohan couldn't hear all that, contemplating whether he really needed to control himself as lust colored his face, and Soohwa apologized in the background. Flashback to when Soohwa got back. He looked around the unit thinking that Yohan must still be washing up. Suddenly, what Hyunho said earlier about making a move and seducing Yohan pops into his mind, blushing and thinking that it's easier said than done. As he kept walking around the apartment, that's when he noticed Yohan's shirt on the floor, wondering why the older man left it there. Soohwa holds it up and stares at it as he thinks of ways to make Yohan like him. Maybe he could start with his looks, but he can't go on par with Yohan's visuals. Personality-wise, his boss is also quite forgiving and lenient, a direct contrast to him and Jiyoon, who bicker a lot. As for money, well, Yohan's well aware of Soohwa's financial situation and he sees how the younger man's energized every payday. Honestly, same. So he's back to square one. What does he really need to do to get Yohan to like him? All that thinking just made Soohwa believe that he was a hopeless case, hanging his head low while still clutching Yohan's shirt. It took a little while before our boy gave in and sniffed the shirt, thinking about how much he loved Yohan's smell, when suddenly the bathroom door creaked open. There's Yohan all washed up and staring at him while Soohwa still has his face on the shirt. He started to blush and panic, trying to come up with an excuse because Yohan looked pretty angry right now, at least from Soohwa's perspective. So now here's Soohwa with his face red and shoved into Yohan's shirt while the older man was busy giving him head. All Soohwa could do was take it and warn Yohan when he was about to reach his peak, while the latter calmly took it and cleaned himself after. Now it was Yohan's turn, feeling himself on Soohwa's body as he called his name, so what else was our boy supposed to do? Even he admits to himself that he doesn't want to do the casual nasties with Yohan anymore, but at the same time he could use it as an opportunity to seduce his boss. With that in mind, he tells Yohan via sign language that he can do it all, while Soohwa finally makes up his mind. He's going to make Yohan using his own tools and even vows it to Hyunho. Speaking of Hyunho, the delivery guy felt his ear tickle, which made him wonder if someone was talking about him, which doesn't really help because it just makes him more nervous. With a shaky smile, he decided to just get on with it and knocked on Byung's door. Hyunho tries to convince himself that he's innocent, and it's not like he's there to inform Byung of what he can't say, so he shouldn't be scared of anything. Yeah, except Byung's a sicko, remember? He just pops off without warning. When Hyunho didn't hear Byung's answer, he decided to open the door and peek inside to see the latter on his phone and lying comfortably on the sofa. Hyunho was surprised to see him on his phone, while the other was quick to ask if there was something wrong with that. Of course, Hyunho tries to appease him, saying it's all cool, it's just that he thought Byung was busy since he didn't answer any of his calls. Byung dismisses him and tells him to drop the master every time he calls him, making the older man ask why, because he's the chairman's son after all. Byung says it's because it makes him sound like a spoiled kid, with Hyunho wanting to stress that he is a kid. Knowing how his master is, Hyunho knows better than to argue, so he asks what Byung would like to be called instead, and the latter says calling him by his name is just fine. It took a moment before the older man tried calling Byung by his name, sounding a little too comfortable at that too, earning him a smack on the face by the psycho. Trivialities aside, Byung sits up and asks him why he was there, but before Hyunho can say his motive, he pleads with the young master not to get mad at what he is about to say. Byung didn't agree and told him that he should just say it first, so with a big gulp, Hyunho said he didn't want to follow his orders anymore. So how will Byung take this piece of news, Byung didn't say anything and stood up, walking past Hyunho while the older man looked back at him nervously. His young master heads straight to the wine cabinet, choosing and grabbing a bottle first before questioning Hyunho about why he wants to quit. The older man could only give him his business smile, but deep inside he was scared and wondering why Byung was suddenly holding a bottle. Even I'm starting to fear for Hyunho's safety with this kid. Thankfully, Hyunho maintained his composure like the professional that he is and began by explaining how he's been delivering all those plants for the last 4 years upon Byung's orders. The job was hard, carrying all those heavy potted plants religiously, but because Byung said he was sending it as a token of apology, he did what his master did without complaint. Even after Byung returned to Korea, Hyunho turned a blind eye to whatever the younger man did. However, he draws the line at harassing Soohwa and is about to say that it's a little too much, but he just decides to wrap it up by saying it's time to stop now, they both know this. With everything he said, Byung zeroed in on the term apologize, repeating how the other man said that he did all that to say he was sorry, which he admits is true. He initially sent all those plants as an apology because he remembered Johan saying he liked plants. But it's different now because Johan ignored him again, making him grip the bottle's neck hard at the mere recollection of it. Byung raged at the thought of Johan knowing it was him who was sending all those potted plants all along, yet continuing to ignore him, making Byung feel like he was treated like an idiot. Hyunho remained silent, thinking about how he initially thought Byung was just a sicko, but it turns out he's much worse. He's an immature psycho. Ian continued asking the other man if he knew that his mother, the chairman, gave Johan the cafe along with handsome settlement money as part of a non-disclosure agreement after he botched Johan's ears. Along with that NDA, Byung was banned from going anywhere near the cafe, more so from going inside, and as if that wasn't enough, he was also forced to leave Korea. Gritting his teeth, Byung says he already apologized, shaking as he asked Hyunho that people should accept other people's apologies when they say they are sorry, right? Such a conceited kid, this one. Ugh. Suddenly he smashed the bottle, shocking Hyunho, who kept still while Byung continued that the mere sight of the cafe soured his mood, rage written all over his face as he said so. He drops the bottle and just like that turns nonchalant again, saying that because he's not allowed to mess with Johan, it's only fair that he gets to mess with the people around him, right? Hold up. What kind of messed up logic is that? A narcissist and psycho to the rotten core. He calmly approaches Hyunho, asking if that is fair, while the older man flinches back, scared of him. As he should. Byung tries to level with him, saying that he was right and that he did his work these past 4 years, so if he wants to quit then he is welcome to do so. However, Byung puts his hand on the inside of Hyunho's blazer, fishing his phone out to check its contents. The younger man warns him that if he gets in his way, pausing momentarily at what he saw, then yanking Hyunho's tie as he says he'll screw him up first, while holding his phone up with Soohwa and Johan's picture on display. Now why the heck did Hyunho even walk in there without deleting that first? I know it's for the plot, but it's still frustrating. While Hyunho was walking on eggshells around Byung, Soohwa and Johan were pretty busy doing the nasties. Well, only Johan is, since Soohwa's almost out of it, telling the other man to stop as he says there's nothing left anymore. He pleads, but Johan continues to do it, and true to the younger man's words, nothing really comes out. Soohwa pleads again for him to just stop, but Johan's too into it, touching and kissing him as he presses close and asks for one last round. That brings Soohwa's consciousness back as he panics and begs for him to stop, choosing to meet our maker rather than take all that. It's a new day. Johan notices how the weather has gotten warmer lately, sliding the windows open as he says so. He remarks that it won't take long for them to breeze through spring and straight into summer. He was musing about how he should start preparing some of his short-sleeved shirts when something caught his eye as he looked back inside. There was Soohwa standing in front of Johan and commenting about how hot it was lately. With a glass of water in his trembling hands, he asks and stutters if his boss would like to freshen up with a glass of cold water, averting his gaze as he says so. Johan was puzzled by the sudden offer, but thanked Soohwa for it anyway, while Johan looked at them with penetrating eyes for a second before distress etched on his face. He knows already, it's these two who are both dummies. But he had to know for sure first, so Johan does what he does best. Confront Soohwa. In the garden, Johan asks Soohwa what's up with him, while Soohwa tries to act normal, weeding the garden as he asks what his sunbae means by that. Plus, why was he always nosing around on Soohwa's business anyway? Johan answers back with a question, asking the younger man if he's asking if he doesn't really know what he is referring to. What exactly has Soohwa done in the past few hours? Let's take a look at his travelogue. For his first entry, he calls out to Johan, offering to give the former a back massage, which kind of makes him like a filial son. For the second one, he calls out to their boss again, taking the latter's hands in his as he comments on how warm Johan's hands are. He rubs it a bit, saying that it must be warm because of his warm heart, is Soohwa trying to be a palm reader with this. For his third and final entry that day, he calls Johan and downs the coffee he made in one go, making the older man panic at his sudden decision. Soohwa was about to say how delicious it was, but in the end he threw it all up, making Johan worried instead, all while Johan watched the whole fiasco from the side. He wonders if Soohwa has gone bonkers doing all that, which brings us to the present. Johan asks if Soohwa is sick and urges him to take a day off if he's feeling unwell, but Soohwa says that isn't the case. His sunbae asks what the deal is if he's not sick. He doesn't really know what Soohwa was trying to do, but from what he has seen today, it was enough to render him speechless, urging his hubei to take a chill pill with it. He's reminded of how Johan reacted, all blushing and flustered, which left Johan with no words. Looking back at Soohwa, he wonders if this little runt was doing that on purpose, and this little runt now turns his attention to him, asking why Johan was staring. He asks the older man if he has never seen someone pull some weeds before, when suddenly he turns serious and calls for Johan's attention. He begins by confirming first if Johan is popular, which he is right. Our boy plopped on the grass and asked Johan if he'd been in a lot of relationships, but his sunbae couldn't follow where he was getting. Soohwa blurted out how he wanted to know Johan's secret to dating, leaving the older man surprised at the question. His sunbae thought for a bit before saying that the first of his secrets is his face. He's right, you know. It never declines. But Soohwa could only give him a look, Johan telling him off for doing so, especially since he can't even dare disagree. Plus there's his threat of wanting to bury Soohwa still looming. Later that night, our boy takes a walk outside thinking how much of a jerk Ji-yoon is, but what he hates more is that he can't even clap back. Screw Ji-yoon, Soohwa decided that he should just see Hyunho and ask for his help instead. For some unknown reasons, he believed that the other man had some dating experience when suddenly a hand appeared from a dark corner muffling Soohwa's mouth as he got pulled into the unlit corner of the alley. His phone drops when he hears a familiar voice he'd rather not hear. It's Byung.